YouTubers, this is Bill McFadden from Tone Pure Music, and we're going to take a look at a piano reduction of the cue in the previous video on how to write heroic or military style or even patriotic style music. They all have the same general concepts behind them. And so here we see the melody. Let's go ahead and play through it. This is actually, the melody is repeated in the cue. In the trumpet initially, we hear it in the French horn, but let's listen to the piano reduction. So we see in the melody line, we have a dotted eighth note followed by the 16th, and also we have another dotted eighth followed by the 16th, another dotted eighth followed by the 16th, and here we have sort of the reversal of that, not quite, and then another dotted eighth followed by the 16th. So in one of the characteristics of heroic or military or patriotic music is they tend to have dotted notes in them. That dotted rhythmic pattern could be dotted quarter, dotted eighth, and we see we have that in the melody. Also, the cue that we looked at, it's pretty slow motion, so we have a fairly slow tempo. Right here, this is about 75, and so we have a slow harmonic rhythm, the speed at which the chords change, so it's fairly slow. And also, if you notice the harmony structure, we have the C chord, the F chord, and then the E flat chord, which is actually out of the scale of C. And then we have that repeated C, E flat, F, and then we actually go up to F and have the same pattern, because in the scale of C, we have the first, the minor third, and then the fourth. Here's the minor third, first, minor third, fourth. And we have the same pattern in the F. This would be your first, your minor third in the key of F, and your fourth, and then back to the minor third. And then also we have, and then we go up again, this time to say the scale of G. Then we have the G, then the minor third of G, and then the fourth. So basically we have that 1 minor 3 4 pattern throughout. Now, another thing that's going on the melody line is, notice we're going from a C to a G, which is a perfect fifth. So one of the characteristics of heroic music in general is the melody lines tend to go up in perfect fifths, or down in perfect fifths, or up and down in perfect fourths as well. So perfect fourths, perfect fifths are very common in heroic music. So here we have a fifth, and then another fifth, and then down here another fifth, and then over here a fifth as well. So that's one of the other common characteristics of heroic music. So perfect fourths, perfect fifths. And for those of you who are not familiar with a perfect fourth, it's 5 half steps. A perfect fifth would be 7 half steps. So those are intervals you want to get familiar with. You want to get familiar with all the intervals. Thirds, minor sevenths. Also, intervals of a minor seventh and major ninth are important. And if you think about it, if you take 2 fifths, like suppose I go from C to G, and then I go up another fifth, I actually have a major 9. So these are common structures in heroic music. and you can use those for chord bases as well. So the chord bases here in the C chord, the first one we have here, is actually a triad, a stretch triad, if you want to call it that, where we have the C, the G, and then we go up an octave. Instead of having the inner C, we go up an octave. And then I also added another C to that. So it has sort of a regal kind of a sound in the chord structure. So, and chords built with a flat 3, which we see here, we're using the flat 3 on the C. And also in the key of F, we have the flat 3. In the key of G, we have the flat 3. So chords built with a flat 3, the flat 6, and even the flat 7 are very common in heroic film music. And we've used those. Also, the minor 7th scale is frequently used in heroic music. And we use major spread triads frequently. And as you can see, all of these are major spread triads. The melodies, for the most part, are diatonic to the scale that's indicated by the chords, and the structure of the melodies conform to the diatonic notes in the scale. And usually, nothing is hard and fast. And the harmony is usually traditional triads and usually major keys, and the degrees 5 and 2 from your stacked fifths, or 4 and flat 7 from your stacked fourths are used frequently in the melodies. And then, as we saw here, we had the dotted 8th followed by the 16th. So your dotted structures are very common. Also, triplets are common, 8th note triplets, quarter note triplets. Counter melodies are also common. I didn't include a counter melody in this cue, but you could have one, especially where you have the whole notes, where you're standing on whole notes. So usually with counter melodies, when the melody line is holding, that's an ideal point to put in a counter melody. And the tempo can be slow to fast depending on the action in the cue, the tempo of the cue, if you will. If it's a fast cue, then of course you're going to have a faster tempo. If there's little action in the cue, if it's primarily just dialogue, then as in this cue here, where we had primarily just dialogue, we had a slower tempo. So the kind of orchestration that we have in heroic cues is primarily brass, for sure. Brass is the major instrument that would always be prevalent. Snare, and for percussion, snare, timpani, bass drum. And then, of course, your harmony is usually indicated by the strings. So you'd have your strings, and even your low brass can augment the melody, as well as woodwinds and the higher registers. And if you want to embellish it, then your upper woodwinds can do runs, and that would be more typical in a fast action cue. And then you could actually have cymbal swells, harp glisses for ear candy on the cue. But this is just a fairly basic cue. And we'll go ahead and take a look at the orchestration one more time and see how that conforms to the pattern that we're referring to. So here we have the cue, and as I mentioned, you have strings in the orchestration for the harmony primarily. Initially, we have the French horn taking the melody. And also in this cue, the piano is included, which sort of parallels the strings. And we have some percussion. And then the trumpet will take over the restatement of the melody, I believe starting in measure 9. And then we have our snare drum throughout. Then the bass drum comes in at the end. And so let's take a look at the cue.
Area 10, How's your work, Colonel? Ward?
Yes, sir.
So you're really going through with this?
I'm going back there, sir.
It's been 3 months without a single indication that Stark is even alive. You can't keep risking assets, least of all you.
But are you blocking my transfer now?
You know, any one of these guys will walk through fire to have your career. Are you telling me you're willing to sacrifice that in order to fly around with a bunch of snake eaters in the off chance you're going to find your friend in the middle of a desert?
I am, sir.
I only have one thing to say to you, Colonel. Godspeed.
Thank you, sir.
So in this cue, I have the orchestration up rather hot compared to the dialogue. Normally we would have that quite low and in the background, but it gives you a good idea how all the elements fit together. So here we have the strings, and I could solo the strings. I don't want to solo my audio, or I don't want to mute my audio. So if we solo the strings, so we hear the chord progression repeating once again, starting at measure 9. Actually, I did throw a G chord in there at the very end as well, which I don't believe was in the chord progression. That one, there was one omission there. So that was the strings, and if we look at the piano, we'll hear the same. It's really just echoing the strings. But it's a nice blend. Here they are together. It gives a little bit of percussion to the beginning of the chord sequence. And then we have the French horn. Let's hear the French horn just with the strings. Bring in the snare. And now the trumpet's taking the melody. Bring in the bass drum. And we actually lost the piano in that, but here's the piano. Then you have your dialogue, bringing that in.
Assets, least of all you. You know, any one of these guys will walk through fire to have your career. Are you telling me you're willing to sacrifice that in order to fly around with a bunch of snake eaters in the off chance you're going to find your friend in the middle of a desert?
I am, sir.
I only have one thing to say to you, Colonel. Godspeed.
Thank you, sir.
As I mentioned before, the dialogue was a little overpowered by the music. So what I've done in the mix, I just have a master fader for the instruments and the dialogue is untouched. So that way you can adjust it to where you want it. So I'll go ahead and give you an
Area
example.
10, shot.
How's your word, Colonel? Word?
Sir,
So you're really going through with this?
I'm going back there, sir.
It's been 3 months without a single indication that Stark is even alive. You can't keep risking assets, least of all you.
But are you blocking my transfer now?
You know, any one of these guys will walk through fire to have your career. Are you telling me you're willing to sacrifice that in order to fly around with a bunch of snake eaters in the off chance you're going to find your friend in the middle of a desert?
I am, sir.
And I only have one thing to say to you, Colonel. Godspeed.
Thank you, sir.
And so there you have it. So this is Bill McFadden from Tone Pure Music. In the future, we'll be getting into other genres like the romantic genre, comedy genre, action genre, fantasy genre, a lot of the genres that you typically find in film scoring. So if you like this video, please click like. And if you want to see the videos and not miss a video when it comes out, please subscribe. Also helps me to keep these videos going. So Bill McFadden from Tone Pure Music signing off.